Okay, call to order the May 17th meeting of the Planning Commission. We have a report out from our closed session.
Actually, have to
We
begin.
do another roll call first.
So Chair Spears,
Present.
Vice Chair Hutt,
Here.
Commissioners Catalano, Dennison,
Here.
Desai,
Here.
Fryerman Hunt,
Here.
and Pevsner.
Here.
Okay. And a report from our closed session.
Yes. The Planning Commission met in closed session with legal counsel to receive a briefing on existing litigation, the case of CETT versus City of Sierra Madre, including City of Sierra Madre Planning Commission, and no action was taken. And that is the end of my report, Chair Spears.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we need approval of the agenda. There's only one item on the agenda.
So moved.
It's been
Second.
moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right. And now we go on to the approval of the minutes of May 3rd. Any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I have one correction on line 173. In talking about the entitlement flow chart, we did agree on some changes to the notice provisions, but then we thought that we needed, for the historic stuff, we needed further direction from City Council. So I would change line 173 to say the Commission agreed by consensus on revisions to certain notice provisions, but determined that further direction from City Council is needed for historic processes.
So what I was told is if you ground yourself, if that starts happening on your mic, it'll stop.
Okay. Any other additions or corrections to the minutes of May 3rd? Okay. I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the minutes of May 3rd with the noted corrections.
Okay. Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Okay, at this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not listed on the agenda. The Planning Commission welcomes your participation and input. When addressing the Planning Commission, please begin by stating your name and address for the record. Seeing no one in the audience, we will assume that there will not be any audience comments, and we will move on to the first item on the agenda.
So the Planning Commission is going to be continuing their discussion regarding amendments to the Municipal Code, Chapter 17.36, Commercial, Zone, and other related zoning provisions. And if we pick up where we left off, probably focus on Attachment A, go through the changes that we have, just to let you know, in the packet, Attachment A is the clean version of the commercial or the definition section.
Yeah,
and then Attachment B shows the red line changes that were under discussion at our last meeting. And as we go through each of the sections, that's how it is structured.
So you'll remember that we made some revisions to different provisions. Those are captured as minor stuff on the thing we saw before, but the definitions, we talked about the need to go into those. And so that's sort of new stuff, but it's not really anything crazy. Basically what the subcommittee did was do a search throughout the whole code and found all sorts of terms that we just don't even use, or we use differently than they're defined, and so they needed to be cleaned up. So if you want to go to Exhibit B, that's the red line, or Attachment B, sorry, you can just chunk through them and can understand why they were changed. So
Okay.
starting, the first thing is there's a slight change in accessory use where it talks about the permitted principal use, and we can talk about that when we get to principal use, why we changed that. Apartment house is just sort of cleaning up a cross-reference. Automobile repair and automobile wrecking are terms that weren't used anywhere in the zoning code. And just as a backdrop, these are general definitions that are used in the title. And that's Title 17, that means the whole zoning. There are some definitions that are used for the whole municipal code, And then we have also specific definitions on each chapter, right? So these are definitions that we use everywhere where we do zoning. So if it's defined here, it should be used. But the thing is, you know, as time goes and you modify stuff, before you had computers and the ability to search, the safe thing to do was just leave an old definition instead of take it out. And so a lot of this stuff just built up, but now that we can search, we can take it away. Bed and breakfast inn was a definition that we put in, that was put in with regard to reuse of historic structures. And so this is just putting in a cross-reference so that we can use it other places in the zoning. The same thing with the below market rate or BMR unit. Next is cellar, which was never used. And really, people know what a cellar is, so I don't understand the need to define it. Condominium, you can see here, is defined to basically just mean an apartment building, but it's defined and used differently when it is actually used. And so this definition is counterproductive. So
You're saying we don't even use it.
well, actually the word condominium is used, but it's actually used more for the term where we have joint ownership of some common part. Whereas here, it's just defined to mean an apartment building.
Oh.
And so this is counterproductive. Court, this definition of court is actually used one place, and that's in the definition of the word yard, which is down below. But everywhere else in the code is talking about lawsuits. So this, again, is not helpful. Dairy's not used. Detached living quarters not used. Drive-in restaurants not used. Dump, although I have these grand definition of dumps, we took dump out, if you'll remember. So we don't want dumps. Multifamily was not actually defined. So,
Really?
and in a search of the code, the term multifamily dwelling or multiple family dwellings are used. So we put both in. Dwelling 3 family is not used. I don't know where that came from. In the definition of dwelling unit, we added this provision just to make crystal clear that Airbnbs are not allowed. That's always been our understanding, but some people thought it was too ambiguous, so we wanted to put that in. We have had some discussion about as to whether we want to allow those, and that's maybe something when we have a joint meeting with council, we can do that. And if we do, and we want to do it in certain places, it's an easy fix to go back and change this. But for now, this sort of clarifies existing law.
And we did recommend that it be on the agenda for a joint meeting.
Yeah, on that one, is it grammatically, is a number and the word interchangeable? The 30?
Oh, you'd rather have it say the...
Well, one or the other.
Yeah, it should be the number. Okay. Yeah, it's my preference to spell out up through 12 and then go to digits. But 30 should be, it's better to have it just in digits, you're right. Then the next is definition of family, and for those of you who remember the great family definition. So there was a definition of housekeeping unit that was added, but it's never used. But then the definition of family was deleted, and family, as in single-family dwelling, is used all over the place, and no one ever put something to connect them. So you can pretty much figure that that's what was meant, but it just was never done. So here now we have housekeeping unit as the cross-reference for family. Not changing the definition of family at all. The next is hotel. In hotel, we took out the prohibition on cooking facilities because now they have suite hotels that have those, and it's a very standard thing. And I don't know whether the reason this was put in originally was because people didn't even know about those, or it's because they were worried that people were going to make faux hotels as a way to do apartment buildings. And so we'll see when we get down into the actual code, we say that the density limit applies to hotels with kitchens. So that you can't use a hotel as an end run into getting, 40 units to the acre or something like that. But that way we can have suite hotels if, for some reason, somebody wants to build one in town.
I'm just curious, and I'm not actually suggesting we have to do this, but is there a definition of cooking facilities?
There's a definition of kitchen.
Uh-huh.
Cooking facilities, I don't think was defined.
Because it's a bit vague, right?
Right, and the other
You know,
thing
is
about
having a microwave, having a cooking
a coffee
facility,
maker is,
is a coffee maker, is a toaster, you know?
I actually think it would be helpful to have a better definition of kitchen than we have. Because right now, I mean, it could be, if you read this, it could be anything. Anything could be a kitchen. It
Yeah.
means any room or space within a building designed and intended to be used for the cooking or the preparation of food. And what does cooking mean? So it could be
Hot plate?
just a hot plate and a microwave.
There's
Or it
some,
could be just a
there's some
microwave
fire
and
code
coffee
issues
pot.
as well in there. When they allowed hot plates into 38 West Sierra Madre Boulevard, there was a lot of consternation. And having just pulled the record for that for something else, there is documentation in there about what kind of appliances could be put in because it determined electrical issues, but also for fire issues.
I've always, well, I mean, this was a long time ago when, and maybe people, maybe cities aren't as concerned about these issues, but the way that I used to always define kitchen was that the cooking appliance had to be installed. It's not just something you set on the corner, on the counter, or plug into the wall. It's something that actually has to be installed. So maybe we can.
I also think the preparation of food could be, you know, spreading peanut butter on a piece of
Right,
bread.
right.
I mean, that's prepared food.
It should include a sink and, you know, sufficient space for the preparation of food.
Something for cooking.
Yeah, some appliance that's an installed appliance for cooking of food, and some refrigeration unit. Because otherwise, it can go against you too. I mean, someone could say, we don't have a kitchen in this apartment complex, where there's no kitchen here. When in fact there's a sink, there's counter space, there's cupboards, there's there's a little mini fridge, and there's a microwave sitting on, and a toaster oven sitting on the counter. Oh, there's no kitchen here.
right, and the issue is, a lot of times, the kitchen is what turns a guest
Right,
house
right,
into a
right.
second unit.
So I could go either way.
And so, and because of the various issues in the past involving what's a dwelling unit, what's a kitchen, I didn't
Yeah,
get into this.
it's a tough.
But we could do a search and see how it's used.
Okay.
The other thing is, I think some of this gets back to building code, right? And what's considered habitable, and I don't know how much we want to get into that when we're doing the zoning. But it is something we could do a search.
I mean, I think it is it could be an issue, you know, and I just think, I mean, I agree that I think it has to have those whatever things you said, which is water,
Right.
refrigeration, and something to cook with, right?
I can't remember if we
That's three
defined-
things.
Well, I mean, you
And-
could,
and
yeah.
space, you know?
It could impact zoning, like, I mean, someone could really try to hammer in, like, you know, we base parking based on number of bedrooms, right? So,
Well, right, when
But
we
if
also
we-
didn't get into the there's.
No, no,
there's
I
no
know.
list of bedrooms. But, you know, the issue of the kitchen can turn a rec room into a dwelling unit.
Right.
Right.
It can,
Mhm.
and dwelling, in our definition, unless I'm missing it here, it doesn't say you have to have a kitchen to qualify as a dwelling unit.
Right. It's designed or used for occupancy for one family. And I think part of this is our definitions have been old and not so great, and we sort of go back into building code and what is the type of things that are required for habitability. And for this purpose, I didn't really try to get into that because we were just really looking at commercial. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter in this instance, but
Okay.
it's something that we probably should come back to
It-
and have a definition of it.
I'm thinking that we did grapple with this previously in residential codes
We had,
perhaps.
I mean, this was an issue with
with the Kensington,
assisted living.
Yeah.
Dwelling unit.
Because I was,
Oh, yeah.
I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I remember I was,
Can they
Causing
make
things about
food?
it.
Do they have the ability to create food, cook in their, whatever the unit is that they're in there?
and it
Do they have
included,
sanitation facilities as
it
well?
included refrigeration, a microwave and refrigerator. And I was saying,
Yeah.
well, I call that a cook. I call
but
it
not
a-
but not an installed stovetop.
Yeah.
Right.
but-
So
Correct.
But, you know, a lot of people don't have, a lot of people don't live with one of those anymore.
Yeah, and
So-
I remember, in another jurisdiction that had a very strict, definition of dwelling unit and what was a kitchen, and was struggling with a similar voters initiative about, well, you can only have so many dwelling units in this area. And they were trying to build a luxury senior housing development, and they wanted more dwelling units than they were permitted. And what changed it to a dwelling unit was a kitchen, and what they ended up doing was they found a very clever unit that was a stovetop that would normally be installed. It looked installed, but it was just a plug-in, and so they built the counter with
A cutout for it.
with a cutout for it, with the little plugs at the back, and just shoved it right in. And so, and these were expensive units, so when you were coming into the building, looking at it, it looked like a beautiful, built-in stovetop. It was electric, not gas, and because of that, they were exempted.
See, that's like the splitting of hairs,
I
which I
know,
want to
but-
avoid.
Exactly.
That's why I'm
Clearly,
telling the
that's a
story.
kitchen.
So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
depends on where we wanna go, what we're worried about, and I would agree with you that tonight's not the night in the
Yeah,
commercial
but
code.
can we like,
Put it on
put it on the list?
Put it on the list. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think,
Okay. So motels moving down is the same kitchen issues. And then the next one is oath, which is surprisingly not used in the zoning code. Neither was operator. And then getting down to principal use. So principal use as defined here means a use specifically allowed of right in any one or more of the zones. The problem with this is we have all sorts of principal uses that we require CUP for. And under our code, it's not a principal use, which doesn't make any sense at all. So I looked at other cities to see how they, the other issue is that even though we define principal use, often in the code we say primary.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have primary use or principal use means the main purpose for the lot. And this mostly tracks Pasadena's language.
Oh, no more quarries?
Yeah, no more quarries. That's not
Good.
We didn't have those. Then the next is residential commercial mixed use. It's interesting. This is a definition when we had a separate section for mixed use that I remember on my first cycle on the planning commission we put in. Then Measure V came and it wasn't compliant. And so instead of making it compliant with Measure V, we just erased the whole thing, but didn't go back and erase the definition. So that's why this, I actually know the story of why this definition was orphaned, but it's not used in our code as currently done. Neither is solid fill or private stable or
can you stop just for a
Yeah.
second? Should singular have quotes around it, because everything else that's defined does?
no, everything doesn't. It's strange the way some things don't. But I think there might be some primaries, like parking space off-street doesn't.
Is some reason why some things have quotes and some don't? It seems like
There's no reason
they ought
that
to all
I-
have quotes around the term.
You know, that was one of those ones where I looked and I thought, I saw 3 examples that didn't make sense to me, and I said, yeah, I'm stopping.
Yeah.
But,
This is what happens.
you know,
Having been an editor, it's like.
You-
Like notice doesn't.
yeah.
And
But-
non-conforming building structure or use? Is that a section? Is that why it's repeated?
Is that supposed to be a heading?
I mean, it's like weird.
Yeah.
Strike that? Because it doesn't, non-conforming building structure or use, it looks like a heading.
Yeah, it is a heading for, I think, those two underneath it.
Oh. It seems like you should
Just
get rid of it.
strike that.
Well, it might look better online. I don't know. But again, you know, we can
Because
we
it
can
looks
fix
like
all
it
this stuff.
doesn't- It looks like it doesn't have a definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell.
Say it goes away.
And what,
There's a point beyond which it's like,
Mhm.
stop, you know. That's what happens when I'm not at the meetings for a while. I'm like catching up on annoying things.
Let me see if the
I see why some is, okay, here's the reason why some of the words are
Yeah.
have quotation marks and some don't. It's quoting, it's defining it. For example, shall is mandatory, or something with quotation marks
Yeah.
means the following, as opposed to just the statement singular period.
It's like an explanation
Yeah.
rather than a definition, an
Right,
explanation
it's
of use.
when, for whatever reason, the drafter at the time, chose to, I mean, we could change it and put singular and quotation
worry,
marks
don't worry
means,
about it.
but
Don't
there-
worry about it.
yeah. So I looked online too. The non-conforming building structure used is a heading.
Oh.
We can take that out if you want or not.
This I'm jumping ahead, but
Do you want to take that out, or do you
Is it
want to
in
just
or
leave
out?
it be?
I want to.
You wanna leave it?
Go.
I
no?
think it should go.
Yeah.
I think it's more confusing.
Consistent. Yeah.
Okay. Any problems with removing it? Okay,
I don't think so.
good.
Where were we? Oh,
We were on
Uh,
singular.
Singular, and then we went into solid fill and stable, and then stand.
Yeah, stand was used not in this use.
Not-
I mean,
not in association
stand
with
was used like a regular English word in many different ways, and so it's like, why are we bothering to define it?
I love on the next page, street frontage, C frontage street. I'm like, really?
It's well, you know.
I got
man.
right here, and now you're sending me somewhere else. Oh.
So target population is used elsewhere?
I didn't check all of them. I really was just looking at the ones that were more related to use. So, yeah, I don't know.
Target population is a legal term of art under, some of the statutes that apply to, so we should just leave that there.
Okay.
Even though it may look weird to you.
Well, I was worried about the opposite, actually, that it didn't have a legal work of art and that we were missing constituencies of that definition.
Right. No, I recognize the definition, only because we actually went through, this in, when we were.
Couple years
doing
ago.
the code, yeah.
Yeah, it's a more recent,
Yeah, I just did a
Living
search.
Facilities, that's,
Yeah.
right.
It's used in, yeah, it's actually just used in other definitions, but it's still used. And then yard, this is where that definition of court was used. So it was only used this one place, so I just put it in there.
Can I ask a question about wall? Is that overly specific?
Fence is defined elsewhere.
Yeah, but I mean, is that the only things you could build a wall out of, those two
No.
materials?
Lumber.
Concrete block or masonry?
No, and the other thing is that I didn't do search to use how wall is used, because if this definition seems like a wall, a freestanding wall that
Right,
separates
yeah.
property, as opposed to
Yeah.
a wall in your house.
Yeah.
But again,
That
we're
might be-
probably better off with just the English standard definition of the word wall. I mean, we really should define things that we want specific meanings for. And I don't see that, no matter how wall is used later, how this helps us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think it's, it misses the whole idea of that, you know, a wall that's a wall of a house, and that's probably, could be used in here somewhere, and also, even if it is a freestanding wall, it seems like you could build it out of other materials than concrete block or masonry.
Well, apparently that's a fence, 'cause
That's the definition of fences, yeah.
But I mean, it could be concrete block or.
Right, so it turns a yard not into a yard if one of those walls is a fence.
Right, and it also becomes problematic where it says a retaining wall. So you can't build a retaining wall, but the definition of wall is made out of this. So if I build what looks like a retaining wall out of something else, it's magically not a retaining wall. So
You built it out of.
maybe we should kill the definition of fence and wall, because these definitions are really not helpful.
If
Okay.
you, if you build it out of railroad ties, then it's.
No, then it's a linear collection of railroad ties.
It's art.
It's
Yeah,
art.
protection.
Yes. And you can't put engineering building code requirements on it.
One of those things that is not useful.
Yeah. Okay, those are the definitions. If we go to attachment D, we can see the red line in the commercial code. So the first thing on page 1 is we added the definition of director's use list that we talked about before, because we started to use that a lot and it became cumbersome not to have a definition. And then getting to 1736.020, the table. Now, here we talked about breaking things, the uses down into different sections or groupings. And so the terminology we had that is to put them in subcategories of general, limited review, and heightened review. And then, so in the introductory paragraph, we added this thing that sort of discusses why individual uses would go into those subcategories.
Okay.
And the prohibition thing was just moved down to another section. It didn't get deleted all. And then also I added this at the beginning, unless otherwise restricted or prohibited by this code, because that was in many places in the chart and was just mucking up the chart. And it was like, well, we could say this once instead of saying it 30 times.
Well, so that retail sales section really just got down to the first
Right,
three
so
lines.
basically, yeah, it comes down to three subgroups. You've got retail sales general, retail sales limited review, and retail sales heightened review. And then on the list, the director's use
That'll-
list, it lists them all.
So,
Smart.
I didn't remember that we'd said that offices outside the prime storefront were gonna have a review for everything, no matter what size?
It's a minor,
Yeah, they have a minor,
minor conditional use.
it's basically because the preference is to get the office out of the retail space. And so if they're
Upstairs
upstairs
or
or
behind.
behind. So if they're gonna come into it, we just wanted to give them a little hoop.
Okay.
So if
That's
you,
what that says, right? If it's located outside the prime storefront?
It's a minor conditional use.
If it's for office, if it's outside the prime storefront, it's upright.
It's permitted, yeah.
But that's not what this says, right? 'Cause it says offices located outside the prime storefront area.
permitted.
Oh, it's requiring a permit, right?
No, this
No.
is this is the
of the three
policy.
categories, that's the,
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the
Permitted versus minus
Yeah.
UP. Got, okay, sorry. Thank you.
and part of it is to incentivize location. So if you wanted to open up a,
I thought all meant all of them required it.
oh, okay, no.
I was putting it wrong.
Yeah, okay.
Permitted, you thought it required.
I guess it
permit,
might
not
one thing from a formatting thing is it might make sense
You need the headers.
to have a header on
On
each
every
page.
page.
The
Yeah.
problem
But
with
you
that
don't know when
is
that's gonna happen.
we don't put it in online, and so I don't know how to do that.
Well,
I
but
think
you
that
could
might
do
be-
it, could you do it like, see how you have office uses? Cause you know that line's gonna,
Oh yeah, yeah.
right in
That's
those
a good
three
point.
boxes.
Oh, there you go.
Every
Yeah.
new heading, yeah.
There you go, at every, yeah.
At every heading.
P, MC,
Yeah.
M
C-
cup and cup.
MCUP and CUP.
That's incredibly more useful.
Yes.
It's also a really simple and elegant fix.
Yes, yes, there's space.
Yeah. Those architects, they're okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Okay. Yeah, that'll make it a lot more clear.
Excellent.
And then service establishments, we have the same sort of concept, and this, again, we did the breakdown based on the prime storefront. The rest of this is mostly cleaning up, getting rid of generic stuff. The certain other uses, we took that out of the chart and it comes below. And then B, after the chart, is where we have the added back the language about the director maintaining the use list, and that things are prohibited if they're not listed. And then also, I added this one bit about alcohol and tobacco always requiring a CUP, just because we had those listed in retail, but they could go into like a hotel or into things outside of retail, and we want to make clear that, you know, no matter where it goes in the chart, you always need a CUP for alcohol or tobacco. And then later on page 5 is the new 1736-020 is the cross references to other uses similar to what we did in R3. On page 6, 1736-040B is the red lines with regard to our discussion on color.
Oh.
So basically, the discussion on color came out to a more recommended thing.
Well, we still,
No,
we
we
do
went-
use the word shall, so we have the ability to regulate, but we're not going to get into saying
Which,
pastels on accents and.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we went
exactly.
round and round, and
I agree with this.
And then the next page, we fixed some lettering. And we also have the charts. This is where they're going to plug in if we want to look at these.
yeah, F and G.
Yeah. I thought we had 2 charts from R3, no? Yeah, F.
Yeah. Well, one question I had on F. I don't want to plug in the R3 ones. I'd want to make more commercial related ones, which is that first 8.5 by 11. But were we talking about this in relation to the front or
No,
the sides?
just the sides,
Not the front.
right.
Okay, so then this diagram isn't.
So, yeah, the
Correct.
diagram,
It needs to
the
turn.
side parts, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because basically we want outside the prime storefront area and the second floor above it. So you can have the frontage and 50 feet back be straight, but then behind that it has to articulate.
Okay. Well, but the way this is worded, okay, so when I read it, and then what I did was I read it and then tried to make a diagram. So when I read it, this is where it led me. I didn't get clarity that it meant not the front, which is what I thought, but only because we had talked about it, and I think we were talking about the sides, because if for some reason they were to put residential use or some other
Right.
use, we wanted that articulation for light and air and all these other good things. So that's fine if it's on the side, but you just said the first 50 feet could be a box. It would have to be articulated after that.
Right, right. That's what I meant by outside of the prime storefront area and the second floor above it.
And this.
I wonder what.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry, we're on
page 7?
Oh, page 7.
1736-040, page 7.
Thank you.
I mean, that could be, we don't know we know what that prime storefront area depth is. It's 50 feet, right?
Mhm.
Regardless of how deep the building is.
Right,
So I think this thing needs to change to be showing the side.
Yeah.
And then we need to show a 50-foot dimension with the dash that says prime storefront area or whatever, right? And then show, because then it's 35 feet. You can still have 35 more feet,
yeah.
right?
Like that.
Well, kind of
You
like
got- you
that,
have the
but
setbacks too.
Well, but you could have the 50 feet and then another 35 and then do your articulation, right?
Right, but after the 50 feet, you have to have setback. Right, you got a 5-foot setback.
Do we in commercial?
Yeah, after the first 50 feet.
We have that somewhere else?
Yeah, in the
Is that
setbacks.
Okay.
Because that was, remember when we figured that's, if you're gonna have residential or office back there, we want the light and air as opposed to.
there's gonna be
as
a-
opposed to a,
Wall, a flat wall. But
Yeah,
You can't
but-
go, because there's a wall to the next building right next to it.
right, and if you have retail, you sort of, you don't,
Yeah.
you're not
So this,
looking out as much.
this articulation on the side is in addition to the 5-foot setback. So
Right.
it would step back to 5 regardless, and then 35 feet later, it would step another 5 feet by 10 feet.
So it wouldn't
Yes.
have to start till 85 feet,
No,
So on this one,
is what we're saying.
it's 50 feet back
back,
to here.
yes, yes.
Before the
The 5-foot.
5-foot
Before the
cutoff.
5, and then another 35 for the next 5.
Yes.
Correct.
So it's like a step thing.
You can tell I'm not, but
Yeah.
there's, 5
Okay.
feet.
That's clear as mud.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll change it to the side, because really, we care about.
Yeah, you want to look at it at a
Yeah.
corner.
Yeah, and that's,
But I think maybe we need to change the language here to make that clear.
Yeah, I didn't,
Because it looks like after 35 feet, you have to have an offset.
yes, that's what I,
That's how I would read it too.
But the prime storefront's 50 feet.
Yeah, but even so, when I read it, I thought from 35 feet, you need to have the setback start. It's not that clear.
I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Um,
And then
we can
the other part of that puzzle is
see.
that second, the articulation on the side, the 5 by 10, the one after 35 feet, does that only apply to the second floor, the second story?
Yes.
Meaning
Yeah.
it doesn't go all the way down? Okay.
Right.
No.
Alright.
Because it's the second floor that's the residential, commercial, and when you think about it, they don't have any windows.
Yep.
Unless somebody puts in a skylight, they don't know whether it's raining or not, or what day, whether it's day or night.
Okay.
I mean, you could just say, in no event shall such linear wall of a second story extend longer than 35 feet past
The
prime storefront
front.
area.
Well, I was thinking we would put both those things.
I mean, the diagram's gonna have that dimension, the
Yeah.
50 feet, like on the side. So what I'll do is I'll do something like, it'll be like that, they'll say 50 feet, and I'll label this prime storefront.
Mhm.
You know, it'll be a dash.
Yeah, we'll clean that up. I understand the ambiguity that you're pointing out, and I see how you could read it that way.
Yeah.
See, that's why you got to read it. You've got to write it so that you can't read it two ways, right? Because I can read it my way, but that's not necessarily all that.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it internally conflicts with itself, but still, which one do you pick?
Right.
That's
You
what,
don't wanna have that.
and hence the illustrations.
Right. Yeah. But it
Okay.
would be nice to just tidy that up so you don't have that possible misreading of what it's supposed to mean.
Okay, and
But
then
the prime storefront area, what we call that 50 by whatever box,
yeah, 50 by
that
what?
only applies on the ground floor, right?
Right, and that's
So that
why we put
extrusion on the-
and second floor above it.
Okay, so that's not really, the prime storefront's on the bottom.
Yeah.
Right.
So the top's really just the second story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's scratch that. Okay. All right, so that will get fixed.
Well, I don't know, is that what we meant? I think it was what we meant.
I think we did,
Yeah.
that 50,
Yeah.
that one you get all the way to,
Yeah, because the whole point we talked
That's
about
still
on the
commercial.
setbacks, because a lot of the buildings are butted up, and so if you had a setback there, it wouldn't really do anybody any
yeah,
good.
you'd be right
Okay.
against another building. Okay. So
So
we'll fix that.
G is the next set is the diagrams for G.
Okay. So, again, I did the same thing, I just read it, and then we had some examples,
Mhm.
like we started to, and then my only thing with this is, when we start down a da-da-da-da-da-da kind of thing, we should say, obviously there are other permutations and combinations, we're just showing you a
Some
few,
examples.
you know, because, you know, they just are. It depends on where they are on the street. Who knows? I mean, this is primarily dealing with the north side.
Right.
Commercial, so I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, you know, the only other thing I thought of putting in here was some kind of dashed line that showed like a view, like
Oh,
what we're trying to.
The guy looking up?
Well,
kind of
just
thing?
something on here showing like we're trying to you're setting it back because you're trying to preserve the view
Mm-hmm.
corridor. So it could be, you know, as simple as a dash on the edge, you know. Anyway, I think I can clean that up a little bit. That last one doesn't really read very well. What I was trying to show on the far right one was if you set it back, but then also that second story was sloped towards the view so that you had a lower roof line in front.
Oh.
But I think I need to exaggerate it.
Yeah, or if you twisted it more on a bias so you could see that.
Yeah, so this one, that was the intent, but it doesn't read very clear, so.
Oh, I thought it was,
about the,
I thought it was the balcony railing that you were at.
Well, I was saying,
Yeah.
this one got into kind of like, I think we did A, B, and C. We said, what did we say? You could set the front facade back. You could have the second story that spans, you know, less than the full width, which is B. And then varying the building heights, I just thought, in my mind, I read like the roof, you know, you can bring the roof down. It doesn't have to be a flat roof at 12 feet tall.
Right,
you
but
know.
it can pitch
Yeah.
forward.
So then the last one is just another variation. Like,
Yeah,
but-
I was wondering on that one if you could exaggerate that one a little bit more too.
Yeah.
So if you, like drop the sides down more and then make the.
That's what I'm gonna do.
The other thing,
And I'm gonna turn it so you see it
Yeah.
on the side.
I don't know if it would be helpful or it's overkill to have another one, but if there was one that's sort of a combination of the first two, so that has sort of just like a notch out of it.
Okay,
You know?
yeah.
But again, I don't know if at some point we're getting to diminishing returns. But I think these are really helpful to
yeah.
illustrate the concepts.
Yeah, like a notch. That can be done easily. Yeah.
Are we okay with our illustrations? Everybody good?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, these are easy to do, so.
Easy for you to do.
Yeah, only you. If they're waiting for me to do it, it'd be a long time.
See what it looks like if I did it. Okay, moving on to the next page, 1736-050, the residential. In B, this is where we added the limit to guest rooms with full kitchen facility.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't do suite hotels as an end run of Measure V.
Yeah. But then, of course, you do need to come back someday and decide what a full kitchen facility is.
Yeah, but we did want to make clear that, I mean, I guess I use the word full because I don't want people to think a coffee maker
Here's a kitchen.
is a
Yeah.
kitchen, right?
Right.
I have a question about 1736-080.
Yeah.
I think Vincent said last week, or last meeting rather, that we're not allowed, or that Public Works said no more rain barrels. And we're encouraging,
Yeah, what does that mean, no more rain barrels? Because you get an incentive to have a rain barrel.
So you got the rain barrel, then you took it back to Home Depot and you got your money back, and so you made money on it.
Yeah, the problem is that the municipal storm sewer, the MS4 permit is pretty serious, and they'll, the regional board and the state board will look at your ordinances to make sure you're doing everything you can. The prevailing idea today, not what it used to be, but today it's capture and hold all the water on the lot. Stop it from spilling off your lot, going into the storm sewer and going to the ocean, which is the way the systems were originally built. But we don't want that anymore because of all the pollution that is going with that water and into the waters of the US. So now, all of our ordinances and everything are meant to comply with this MS4 permit to capture that water and keep it on site. And that's why we have the low impact development, landscaping and all the berms and everything. So the problem is, and this is what Public Works is telling us, is rain barrels are a great idea, but they're just removable. They're not a permanent feature. And then it defeats the whole purpose, and therefore we've got an ordinance where we're really not complying. We just need everybody to, under this theory, to do their part to keep and capture the water on their lot.
In addition to that, the quantity of rain barrels that would be required to capture the amount of rainfall that we're talking, that first 1¼ inches within the first hour, is pretty excessive. So to give you an example, the 630 square foot garage that we saw at our last meeting, it showed 2 rain barrels that they just placed on their own in their exhibit. If you calculate it out, it was going to be in excess of 20 rain barrels required.
So how do you build it? I mean, that means you're required to build a cistern that would be that size?
Yes.
That's
Or
not even.
berm,
Or
some kind
a
of
bioswale,
landscaping, or,
yeah.
bioswale or permeable landscape.
You let it percolate into the ground.
Stays on your lot and adds to the groundwater. Where
But
it
you don't
can't be
you don't
charged to be
capture it.
reused.
A whole bunch of sand or gravel.
Well, you could with a cistern, but.
You
Or
could.
you
but-
just don't fill in the cesspool that you used to have, and you just, but
And you just have a mosquito.
no, and you just have it, everything go into that. So whatever old becomes new again.
Put dikes on our properties or something?
But they're banning rain barrels? I mean, I can understand how you could say rain barrel wouldn't be,
No.
Yeah, they're banning them, not.
They don't qualify.
They
You
don't qualify.
but if you want to have a rain barrel at your
Oh,
house.
you can.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
You
well,
just
that-
don't get it.
As
You
long
don't get
as
any
satisfy
credit.
Your,
Fine.
Compliance.
permeable landscape
So
requirements.
then in this language, then rain catchment infiltration retention features would not be a rain barrel. It would have to be a cistern or a bioswale or blah, blah, blah.
Infiltration.
And Public Works will
Field.
be happy to tell you when you come in with your application what that means.
So this is only for commercial. This isn't something that's gonna spread to residential, so every new house is gonna.
No,
It's throughout the city.
Yeah.
So every new house is gonna have to have some kind of rain catchment
Yes.
They're gonna have to
to
do that.
meet that requirement?
That's
If you
already the
build brand
case.
new construction, that's already the law.
Yeah, it's already
Yeah,
in
and
the
you're gonna have to have solar pretty
green
soon, too.
the green building code.
Yeah, the solar panels are coming soon, yeah.
2020, right?
But, well, I mean,
So does that answer your question on this? Yeah, I think it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, moving on, in parking, we took out this cross-reference to BMR unit because we added the BMR unit to the general definition, so we don't need to cross-reference it. And let's see. Let's see, on page 11, 1736, 130 hours of operation, we got rid of that strange little 1 hour business. And then also I put a hard date in, perhaps somewhat optimistic hard date, but we can change that if need be. The hard date by when this will be passed by the city council, so people won't have to look that up later. And then on page 12, in property maintenance 1736 170, this is where we added the provision with regard to hazardous materials. And as we discussed at a prior meeting, hazardous materials tend to not be regulated in zoning. And so, hopefully, there are other laws somewhere that properly regulate this on the county or state level. But there it is. But by stating that they have to comply here, and then saying that the reviewer can take into account in the granting of a discretionary permit the likelihood of compliance, that gives the reviewing authority the right to say, okay, I want the materials that show you're gonna
Yeah.
use whatever it is.
Show, prove us.
And staff is contacted the Joint Powers Insurance Authority through Human Resources, and we're waiting to hear back if particular land uses that have hazardous materials associated with them are regulated differently or could be regulated differently in terms of the application of additional cost to the city for that particular use.
Okay. And clearly, if there's one of those that we didn't think of, we could, when we, on the list, we could bump that up on the CUP.
Yeah, but the logic is that the joint powers are our hazard mitigation experts for insurance, and they would advise us that, you know, there's some things that will cost the city more and you know, and certainly, you know, my pet peeve is that we now only have 5 or 6 guys on duty, and we could easily overwhelm their ability to protect the city by allowing certain kinds of commercial uses that would, you know, if they got out of control or out of hand, would put us in a bind, you know.
Right, and instead of guessing at what those uses are,
Right.
we could actually ask the people who keep track. I mean, so that's a much better idea, I think.
Like the burning gun shop next to Trader Joe's on Rosemead.
Do you remember that?
Yes,
The gun
I
shop that went
do.
off? And we were invited to that fire, and they was going for a long time because everybody was hiding up the street behind the corner.
Sounds like fun.
So
What was the business?
it was a
Gun shop.
it was a gun shop that had a rifle range in the at one part of it, and it caught fire. And Engine 5 from the county went down there and quickly put it in reverse and backed up around the corner, and it sat like that for hours while, you know, things kept going off. So,
Yeah, I don't
There
think
was
you
a
want to mess.
Trader Joe's next door, which I guess
Yeah.
also burned.
Yeah.
Or something they moved.
Well,
That's why they ended up where they
yeah,
were. but-
no one was going to go near it to put it out, so yeah.
Why would they? Yeah.
Hmm.
So there's,
So things like that.
yes, right. So, but gun shops are CUP.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. We got that one.
Just in case there's
Just to
something
prove the
else like
point.
that, right?
Yes.
Something else special that.
Fireworks.
There you go.
Yeah, fireworks. Well, I think fireworks are pretty much banned, so.
Tire stores and pallet factories.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. So that's the code, and then if we go to attachment F is the list of commercial uses, the red line.
Yeah.
So the first change is we changed the terminology to the same 3 subgroups, subcategories. We had a discussion about whether computers are included in electronic stores, so brought that into the 80s at least. But that's the joy of a director's list, because Vincent can make it better after we get done. And then so on the next page, here are the list of the limited review subcategory and then the heightened review.
Yep.
On retail sales heightened review,
Mhm.
might we add vaping to tobacco sales?
What is,
Vaping.
Vaping are
Electronic
the
cigarettes.
electronic cigarettes. They don't necessarily have
Tobacco.
tobacco in them, but I think that we would all want them to be what?
Yeah.
They can have tobacco in them, but they can also not. So
What do
we
they
could have.
Cigarettes.
They have
All kinds of stuff.
flavor, all kinds of stuff that just
Not only
slightly
that,
aren't
but
tobacco.
But they can also explode in people's pockets.
And they are on airplanes.
Yeah.
And they do.
Mm-hmm.
They're about-
I
Yeah.
didn't know if that was something, because if all of a sudden we had a vaping store in town, I think that we would have the same concerns as a tobacco sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's it. The concern is, what, I guess, how do you say this? This is a list of uses that are permitted with a CUP, right? And we want to make sure that when you're vaping, there's a certain thing you can do legally now in the state that you're not going to be vaping. So we can't just do it generically, because wouldn't we allow people to vape pot?
Right. I mean, if you're, if the vaping means you would be selling the paraphernalia.
Right.
Yeah.
Do those other things have nicotine?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that's the whole point. Or nicotine delivery system.
They're
Without,
But I thought
without
they
the
were like
carcinogens,
liquid
Allegedly.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So could we
what you
put
believe.
tobacco and or nicotine? Would that cover it?
Nicotine delivery systems?
Well, it's still sales, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it still sells.
Yeah, tobacco, nicotine, or nicotine sales,
Well,
and whatever
yeah, but
permeation it,
if you designate the delivery system, then that takes care of the, what you're talking about, the
Yeah,
paraphernalia.
that's fair.
yeah, because then they can't sell the nicotine, which is the vape, which is what vaping stuff.
Well, but you
Does it
can,
take a prescription to get the gum? No, it doesn't take a prescription to get the gum. You can buy that.
Yeah, you
So
can
pharmacy-
buy.
That's the doctor.
That would be nicotine though, right? So
Yeah,
are we
so-
concerned about people selling the nicotine gum?
No,
I don't know, I'm
I mean, it's a
I'm really
drugstore
asking the
thing.
question.
It's a
Yeah, they would be a
drugstore thing.
drugstore.
we could say
That's
tobacco
Well, yeah, but that
and
means you're gonna
nicotine.
require CUP for a drugstore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
If you
tobacco
sell-
and nicotine except chewable nicotine.
Well, no, so
Yeah.
I think tobacco,
Okay.
comma, or nicotine delivery systems, right? That's what we were
Mhm.
saying, because it's the vaping
Yeah.
tools themselves that we're worried about. Or at least, that's what I was concerned about.
But isn't the patch a delivery system?
Yeah.
We're down that rabbit hole now.
Well, if we put anything that you could vape, right? And then someone came in here and wanted to do a marijuana shop and vape, we could deny that CUP, right? Or what?
Well, I mean, you could. The law right now is anywhere that you prohibit smoking or the sale of tobacco products or the use of tobacco products, you're allowed to include marijuana in that same category. So if you have the authority to say no smoking in these places and no sale of tobacco, cigarettes, or whatever, you can say the same thing about marijuana. Or you can just say, you know, you can't sell marijuana here. But you also have the authority, I mean, if you restrict places where this is a use more than a sale, where smoking is permitted, if you restrict it. So for example, some cities say you can't smoke on the sidewalks, you can't smoke in the park, and you can't smoke within 25 or 50 feet or whatever from an area that we told you you can't smoke in. So there's like an envelope around it. The law also allows you, but you'd have to specify it in your code, smoking means vaping of anything and cannabis. So that's a little off topic for what we're talking about here, but I just wanted to try to clarify that.
Well, so
Can you, could you find out how people describe vaping products in code? Is there a
Well,
way
can
to-
we-
I
can
mean,
we-
someone must
it
have
sounds like we could just say,
prohibited.
They describe it as cigarettes or e-cigarettes.
Oh,
well,
so
we
why
could
don't
say
just that? Cigarettes or
tobacco,
e-cigarettes?
e-cigarettes, or any or any other thing that you can vape, other than marijuana. Can't we say that?
Yeah.
Because marijuana is prohibited.
Right, you can say that.
So just.
But then we don't have to
tobacco-
get down to nicotine.
Are we
tobacco
okay
or
with that?
e-cigarettes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
does it fulfill? Okay,
brilliant.
good.
Yeah, great.
Consensus.
Okay. Then moving on to service establishments, we have the same breakdown into the 3 subcategories. And we move some of them to those subcategories. And here we had that duality with the prime storefront, as we talked about last time.
Notice the car share services, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we wanted to put, and one of the things about having a list that's not as part of code is you can actually give an example, even though Zipcar's probably gonna go out of business
Yeah.
before we update our commercial code again. But this list can be easily updated with
What's the,
whatever it's called, Zipcar Deluxe or something.
the tail end of that sentence? Including parking there,
Or 4.
oh, therefore.
other
Yeah,
words,
because the car share service is actually mostly gonna be just parking,
Parking space.
Oh, okay.
but it includes the parking for the car share service.
I was thinking about I looked at this and I was thinking about the bike share stuff, which isn't likely to come here, you wouldn't think, for a while. But I've been reading these things about how annoying people can be leaving their bikes and scooters and stuff.
They're all over Monrovia, and also, and there's a big fight in Santa Monica about at the birds, the little
Yeah.
scooters.
Yeah.
Would-
Yeah, so,
Cause they just
I
leave
I don't know
them.
if it goes
People
here,
just-
but it's a thing to
city
think
owns it,
about
they
in the
just
future, that they
take
may
them
start
place to
showing
place
up on our
and
streets.
leave them wherever.
Yeah, there's different programs for them.
For them and
You
stuff,
have that
so.
happen, you pick it up and you can unlock it
Mhm.
for a certain amount of time, and you can use it, and
Oh.
you just leave it when you're done.
Wherever you,
You just leave it wherever.
Wherever.
Yeah.
Right, or as opposed to the metro one where you have to go to one of their
Yeah,
stations.
Right.
I
racks,
think
yeah.
that's right. I saw a thing on,
Red good,
this is a
red
total
gold
digression,
bad.
and I'll take 1 minute.
Okay.
I saw a thing about this in
And then all of a
cities in
sudden you
China,
create a whole
where they had
conundrum.
all these companies doing it at once, and there's like a mountain of bikes. I mean, like a mountain of bikes, because they left them on the street, and so they just collect them and throw them into this humongous, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of brand-new bikes.
What?
Because all these startups are doing it, and then there's too many bikes, and the cities are saying, So,
Take one.
it just made me think about it.
Yeah,
No one
It's
can
the
miss
little
it.
something on supply and demand.
well,
Yeah.
there's, in the Netherlands, they have bike share systems where they just have public bikes, and you just use them.
Yeah.
And no one steals them. So, yeah, I guess different systems work in different places.
Yeah, but there may be something that'll need to be addressed eventually around it.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the beauty of
Yeah.
the offline list. Okay, so that's the service establishments. I don't think there's any other stuff that's too wild.
I thought the lists look good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In the automobile stuff, we separated car, motorcycle dealerships, and then also put parking facilities as a primary use. And then in residential, going through the definitions, I didn't realize this before, but that we use multifamily to mean 3 or more. That's
Oh.
duplexes are
Duplexes.
special beast in between single family and multi, so we added the duplexes here. Manufacturing zone, we didn't have any changes from the last meeting.
This seems like it's ready, huh?
Yeah, so then the next one is the discretionary, which we only had a really few, and that's attachment.
H.
H is the clean, and I is the red line, and we can see this is where we just took out the dumps and some other uses. So we
Okay.
got and these are not page numbered fabulously. 1760-030, this when CUPs are required. Any there?
That's it.
So A is where we took this list out of open space. It says not counting open space or canyon. And then we took out dumps, establishments and enterprise involving large assemblages of people, amusement parks, circuses, labor camps, natural mineral resources, refuse disposal of, which is somewhat different than a dump. And then we added swimming pools as a primary use. But then there were these 2 definitions of public utilities that we punted on at last meeting, and we need to get staff or city attorney input on why we have 2 separate ones and what is the point of these things. And then on the next page, there's the CUP for the H zone, which we took out because we've got an H zone that has its own stuff. And I think that was all the changes in this section.
One of the things that may influence that public utilities is the need for cell communication in this town, and the fact that they are making smaller cell towers that can go on a utility pole, and maybe that would, influence what we allow or not allow.
Right. I think I definitely think we should put on our to-do list to go back to the wireless section and review that.
It's actually on our agenda with the city council for the joint meeting.
Right.
Because we need to be in concert with their
Yeah.
interests.
So it sounds like we've got this thing with the public utilities. It's about 3 or 4 little cleanup things. A couple of tweaks on the diagrams. Did we want to do the kitchens, or do we want to punt on the kitchen thing now?
I think we can punt on it and come back later.
I don't think it's a pressing issue, but I think it's
in this-
something.
I think it's pressing in this zone, really, but
Yeah.
I think it's something we do want to think about,
Right.
decide what we think the kitchen is, because it's, yeah, we should.
We could bring other, code examples
Mhm.
defining kitchens
Yeah.
at some point in time when
Yeah.
you wanna.
Yeah, we might want to understand why we use kitchen, and then also attack the issue of bedrooms.
Yeah.
Because we have like definition of bedrooms that are different in different zones for some weird reason. And so those might be things we want to tackle at the same time. And maybe we want to do that after or the same time we do parking, because I know we trigger some of the parking on bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And so, maybe if we move that to square footage instead of bedrooms, we wouldn't even need to deal with bedrooms. But it's really why we use the terms that we need to understand before we can
Right.
start tweaking.
Yeah.
And I think at least parking in the commercial zone we also thought about that being as part of something we talked with the city council about.
Right.
Because it's influencing the development of our downtown area and what can and cannot be done, and we probably need to be, once again, in concert with our vision of the future of the downtown is. So what's our preference? Should we give this over to staff to
Yeah, I mean, I think
do the final polish?
it looks like we're just about ready for a public hearing.
Yeah.
Because we can bring, do a red line on these few little changes. That's gonna be pretty simple.
I can
Try
get
to
I
do it
think-
quick before we move on to the next thing.
Yeah, we need to, it'd be nice to get it completed because we're gonna be working on other things
Right.
soon.
And also, I think that, the issues we talked about discussing with the city council in a joint meeting, I think that this stuff is a lot more straightforward than that. And I would love to get this done, because if we bring these and general issues, then we'll get bogged down.
Mhm.
We'll waste our whole meeting,
Right.
talking about, line 46 or something.
Right.
So it would be great to get this moved on, and then we can get to that other stuff.
Is that good? Do we need any motion or vote to do that?
Just staff direction.
Okay. Shall we, so move that we direct staff to do that?
That would be fine,
Okay.
and I'll find a slot when we can bring this back as a public hearing.
Okay,
All right. Good work.
excellent.
Yeah.
Once again, thank you, John. You
my
carried the,
Subcommittee.
you carried the yeoman's load here. I tried to read and keep up with you.
Likewise, I'm
My,
sure.
okay. Once again, we have an opportunity for oral communication, but there's only one member in the audience.
Hey.
All right.
Where did an
Thank
audience member
you.
show up from?
Guys are just dying for someone to say something.
Really?
Well, good evening, Commissioner Spears and Planning Commission. Just wanted to say I'm your new liaison, but after I was appointed to that, I realized that I do have a conflict on the second Thursday of the month, so it may change, or I may just take the first Thursday and somebody will take the second Thursday. But I'm looking forward to it. I love the Planning Commission, and I do find the stuff you work on absolutely fascinating and very, very important, of course, to the city of Sierra Madre. So I'm looking forward to when we have a joint meeting, and just speaking for myself, I want to hear from you guys as to what you think about things, because you're in much closer to a lot of it than we are. But we do have 3 council members that have been reelected, and they've been out knocking on doors, and they probably have some feedback from our citizens out there. So it's a good time to have a discussion with the Planning Commission. So,
Well, speaking for myself, I'm sure the rest of the Planning Commission, we very much appreciate your presence here, because very often we want members of the council to understand how we arrived at whatever it is that we send to you.
yes, it is very helpful. So I will certainly be here as long as I'm the liaison. So.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, hearing from the entire audience, we'll bring it back. Any issues from the Planning Commission that you want to report?
I will not be able to make the next meeting. I'll be on vacation.
The next meeting is the,
The next meeting is June 7th, and we're actually canceling that meeting.
and I will be on vacation as well, so
I still want
So
to
will
visit.
perfect attendance. All right.
You're tracking perfectly with it.
Anything else? Okay. And anything from the staff?
So our next meeting is June 21st, and it appears that we'll have a project that the commission will be reviewing at that meeting. I'm anticipating that we'll come back as a public hearing for the commercial amendments in July 5th.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Anything else? Okay.
That's it.
And we stand adjourned to the second meeting date in the
June
21st? June 21st.